Welcome to the Dive Table. I'm Jay Gardner.
And I'm Sarah Miller. And right now, as we record this, it is currently Shark Week.
Shark Week.
Shark Week.
Dun-dun, dun-dun, dun-dun.
Neither of us had this on our schedule because we don't watch it. But we recognize that it's a big deal for a lot of people, and we're going to talk about it.
All right, Sarah, let's face it. Sharks have a bad rap in general. They're like the villain of the underworld, the underworld, the undersea world. There we go. I could speak.
It's all
and
good.
There's so many stories and so many things that come out of sharks. In fact, I was just in the pool with my kids like every day. It's summer, so every day all they want to do is swim all day.
I mean, it's fantastic. So hot right now. Like, that's the only way that you can exist with this heat wave that's going on.
Yeah, we can't really. We live in San Diego.
Fair.
It's not that bad. I promised myself after moving from Texas I'd never use the word hot unless it was true. So it's not too bad.
That's fair.
They get in the pool and all they want to play is sharks and minnows, and ultimately it's predator and prey, right? They want me to be the shark that chases them around and they want to run from me for some reason. So, I mean, sharks from the swimming pool all the way to the ocean have a bad rap, and we want to talk about it. And we don't really have a strong structure for this episode or point to make, but you and I wanted to talk about this, so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I have a point to make. I hate Shark Week.
Yeah. You do have a point to make. Great.
That is my point to make. No, I get really frustrated because I love sharks, as I'm sure most listeners feel the same way, right? Like, a lot of scuba divers really love sharks. Maybe not all of us, but I think across the board, we can all recognize how important they are for the environment, right? And those of us that are obsessed with them, we don't want to see them painted as these like non-thinking, bloodthirsty killers. Ever since Jaws came out, like, I mean, even me, I'm from California, born and raised. I want to see them, but I have an innate fear of great white sharks. Like, I just do. I mean, I've known people who have gotten bit, so it's a scary thing. It's a real thing, but ultimately they're animals in their environment. We're not supposed to be out there. Like, when we go in, we're signing a contract of like, we understand there are risks with going into the ocean, right? It's kind of like in certain places in California, there are riptides. Like, you need to understand the risks that are at play. But I think people still have this idea that sharks are out there just looking for human beings to munch on. And it's like, that's just not true. It's not.
Yeah. I have an admission to make, and this will probably lose all credibility with our listeners right now in general, but I actually have never seen Jaws. And that's a purposeful decision for me because I love the water. And I never wanted to see a movie that would just be in my, the background playing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've visited exactly. I've always thought it'd be funny to have an underwater speaker and just have that song on somehow. I don't know how you do it, but be able to play that song, with your friends and see how they react. But you'd have that background imagery somewhere latent in your brain, and so I've decided for a long time not to watch that movie. Although I have visited Bruce, who was the name of the fake shark that they used on the movie, many times at Universal Studios, and been through. But I think it's gone now, but they used to have this whole Jaws attack on the backlot tour that you went into, and the dock gets pulled over and things explode and the big shark comes out and scares you. But there is a lot of sensationalism around sharks, and it's, in some ways it's understandable. They are large, in some cases, large creatures with 3 or 4 or 5 rows of teeth, depending on the species, that are sharp, and they're sleek and can look scary under the water. The question is, are they innately scary to us, or are we conditioned through all of the sensationalism, Jaws all the way through wherever, to be scared of them? And
It's
it's
yeah.
an interesting question, right?
I feel like it's got to be a bit of both, right? The thing that people ask me all the time, because when I say I love sharks and I'm talking to non-divers, they're like, "Oh my gosh, aren't you afraid? Like, aren't you afraid of them?" And especially for scuba divers, it's a little bit different for swimmers and free divers, spear fishermen. There are some different factors at play, but
Surfers.
for
Yeah.
surfers, but for scuba divers, generally, sharks don't want to be around us. Like, unless we're participating in some sort of feeding activity, which I don't, that's a whole other conversation that we're not going to get into. They don't want to be around us. We're loud, right? Like, usually they're afraid of us or they can't be bothered. Like, it's kind of one of the two. I noticed that in places like Komodo, when it's strong current and whatever, like they don't care about what's happening with the aliens blowing bubbles around them, right? But in other places, like in Baja, when you go out to try to see hammerheads at Gordo Banks, which is in between Cabo San Lucas and San Jose, they're super scared of us, you know? So it's, I don't know. People think that sharks are just going to come out of nowhere and chomp your face off when you're scuba diving. It's like, that's not the case at all.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
literally never had a scary moment in scuba with sharks, and I've been diving with bull sharks. I haven't done any of the other big three, right? Like great white, tiger, and bull. I haven't done the other two, but like bull sharks, I've never had any issues.
Yeah, me neither. I'm the same. I've dove with a lot of bull sharks. I haven't done great whites yet, and I haven't done tigers yet, which are on my list.
I want to so bad.
Yeah, me too. Me too. The great
So
whites,
bad.
especially.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think you're right. I think that we can get into feeding a little bit, because that's a whole, like you said, a whole nother podcast of content. But I've only really had one moment ever in all of those dives that I felt my heart beat kind of accelerate and felt that. And it was all mental. Nothing to do with the behavior of the shark. But we had been on a bull shark dive. We were heading back to the boat, and kind of, I don't know how best to describe it, but there was a collective fear. It was a very recreational boat, and the people that were on it, and you just get this feeling underwater, which is a weird thing in general. We could talk about for days, but that everyone just was tense, and we were headed back to the boat. And in this particular dive site, the boat wasn't where it dropped us off, right? There was current, so we had to drift to with an SMB and get picked up by the boat. And I remember I'm kind of sensing this feeling of everyone really afraid, and I'm like, I'm good. I'll just let everyone else get back on the boat. And we're waiting on the surface. People are slowly getting back on the boat. And I look down on the water, so my mask on, look down on the water, and you see one of the bull sharks has followed us up, to the boat. And that's likely because we had been feeding, right? Or I hadn't, but the trip, part of the people had been feeding. So they're still hungry and want some more food. So they're and just looking down, crystal clear water down, seeing this bull shark circling kind of up towards the boat, with me, the only one kind of in the water at this point, while other people are getting out. I felt that heart rate for a minute. Like, wait a minute, I don't have the snacks. I don't have the fish here. Like, I hope you're going to leave me be. And of course, the shark got up there and noticed there was no food and went back down, to 100 feet.
They're not dumb. That's the thing. Like, people think that they get confused, right? Like, that was kind of a common, I don't know, like knowledge that people thought for a while or whatever, that they get confused. And so that's why shark attacks happen to humans, right? And that's not really the case, because they're very intelligent. They understand the difference between a moving sea lion or something versus a surfer, right? But the thing is, they don't have hands. Right. So like you and me, if we see something interesting, like we're going to pick it up and look at it and touch it, right? Try to figure out what the heck it is. But sharks have their mouth. And unfortunately, when you need your mouth to figure out what something is, and you have big teeth, tends to do some damage, right? So I think it's just a misunderstanding on our part of what they're doing, because when shark bites happen to humans, you never hear about a shark like completely devouring a human being, right? They take a little look around, and unfortunately that's pretty significant for us. Usually it's damaging, but they don't go back and like nom 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 on us because we're not good food for them. They know that.
So, and that's not to say, you know, to diminish, there are shark attacks
100%
that happen, and typically it is that experience of exploration, but you're exploring with the mouth. And so there are people that have experienced this. But when you get into the data, and that's where I kind of like to look as well, is to say, you know, shark attack, the odds of being bitten by a shark in Florida, let's just take with Florida, this is what was published, are
Florida
1 in 11.5 million.
Wait, say that again.
1 in 11.5 million.
Wow.
That's being bitten. The chances of you dying or being killed by a shark are less than 1 in 264.1 million.
Wow.
So they're very, very small. In comparison, you have a higher chance of dying from a lightning strike. That's 1 in 38.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
In coastal states. Or a wasp or a hornet. Guess what the rate is there? You have a 1 in 6 million chance of dying from a wasp or a hornet attack. So when you look at the numbers and you say, okay, yes, there are shark attacks, but they're very rare, and the chances they're going to happen are astronomically low. Not that they won't happen, but they're very, very low.
The thing is that they're very traumatic when they do happen, right? You're in the water, you're out of your element, right? And it's super scary because they come out of nowhere. So not to diminish anybody who has had a scary experience with sharks, but it's just it's sort of a reality check, right? And so getting into what our topic, like the reason we're talking about this, Shark Week, I get really annoyed with Shark Week. I honestly only see a handful of clips every year, because I can't stand the sensationalism and the clickbaity culture of Shark Week. Last year, I got so fed up with last year. There was a program called Cocaine Sharks. Have you heard of this?
Yes, it's ridiculous.
I
didn't watch it, but I heard of it.
I watched like a little snippet of it because I was like, this is insane. There's like, I'm sorry, this is insane. So I had to watch some of it, and it was as dumb as I thought it was going to be. Like, first of all, there are so many things to research about the ocean and sharks. Like, why are we spending time on this? Okay. Like, there could have been a really interesting point that they could have focused more on. And the fact of, I've actually seen other articles come out about this, pharmaceutical runoff, right? Like people throwing their drugs in, down the toilet or into water supply, and how that's affecting fish and creatures, and that our pharmaceuticals are terrible. They don't degrade properly. There's not like a common sort of responsibility of disposing this stuff properly. Right. So that could have been like a really interesting conversation to have. But instead, they focused on sharks eating bricks of cocaine off the Florida coast. And like, could this be making them super ragey and attacking everyone? It's like, where are you going to get that data? How, like, again, sharks do not go after non-food just for like the fun of it, right? Like, sure, because of the nature of cocaine getting dropped into the ocean, for sure, some fish and sharks have been exposed to cocaine. I don't doubt that at all. But the idea that they're becoming these rage, like cocaine addict sort of machines is absolutely absurd to me. I don't know, but it was clickbaity. I mean, it got me to watch part of it. So, I don't know. It's stuff like that that really annoys me, because it's doing a disservice to sharks in general, and we need them. Like, we need sharks in order for the ocean to be okay.
Yeah.
They're apex predators.
About why. Exactly. And the reason why is because if you do any even light research on ecosystems, a lot of an ecosystem's resilience and biodiversity comes from the balance of prey versus predator. And typically there's much more prey than there is predator. That's the balancing system there. And if there's an imbalance, the resilience and the biodiversity of that ecosystem degrades and eventually disappears. And so sharks, as typically the apex predator in their ecosystem, and granted, there are over, I think, between 400 and 500 different species of sharks that we know about today. So that's not just, the great white or the tiger or the bull that we've been talking about. There's tons of different sharks.
Black tip, like these nurse sharks, leopard sharks, like these smaller ones, right?
Horn tip sharks. Remember, we had a very sharky dive, right? With some horn tips, amazing dive. But they're typically the apex predator in their ecosystem. And because of that, they play a vital, or in a lot of times the way that you talk about this, they are a keystone species in that ecosystem, meaning that if you remove that species from that ecosystem, the ecosystem will start to degrade or fail. Yeah. And so sharks are an incredibly important part of our diversity under the sea and in their ecosystems. And so unfortunately, the biggest predator to sharks are humans, right? Yeah. Overfishing, shark fin
bycatch,
bycatch, all of those sorts of things. And also just fear, right? There are people that will kill them out of fear.
Well, that's the thing that a lot of advocates in like Australia are fighting against killing the sharks because they're at these popular beaches that people want to be. And it's like, that's their home. The fact that we want to be at the beach is whatever, right? Like we have all of land to explore. Doing that is crazy to me because it's completely disrupting that ecosystem, which is very dependent on sharks.
Right. Yeah, and I think beyond that, there's also the role that sharks play in maintaining a lot of what we've come to know as the tourism that happens in these places. So if you enjoy the reefs that you go out and see wherever it might be, those reefs are regulated or balanced out by the presence of some sort of predator. And typically that predator is a shark. And we see actually the opposite of this in Florida. There's a lot of talk about the lionfish and the fact that the lionfish don't have a natural predator in that ecosystem because the sharks won't eat them or can't eat them. I don't remember exactly. I have to check myself on these facts. But they don't get eaten by an apex predator. So therefore they're
not
proliferate.
From there. Yeah, exactly. Right. And they eat like crazy. I mean, all of the juvenile fish. I mean, it's very clear when you go to those places. I haven't been diving in Florida, but experience in Mexico. And like, it's so clear when you see the effects. Like, I mean, just in the few short years that I lived there would be fish, right, at these popular dive sites. And then you notice the population of lionfish go up, and a handful of weeks later, where are all the fish? Yeah. I remember guiding one day, and we hadn't gone out. Like, as a dive shop in Ishkalak, we would do lionfish hunting, right? And we served it in the restaurant. It was kind of cool, actually. Yeah. And people love participating in it, and they know that it helps the reef. So it's, win-win-win. But I remember going to this dive site and looking around. I'm like, I like literally any fish. I would give anything to find a fish to show these people, right? It was wild. I felt so bad for them because I'm like, this is the reef and there's nothing here to see, right?
Get all these wet rocks.
Yeah. Luckily, like, there's still coral there, but it was mind-blowing. All of a sudden, I remember a turtle came out of nowhere, and I was like, thank God. Okay, everybody look at the turtle. But it's terrible, and that's what happens. And what I love about social media is it's combating this narrative, right? Like Discovery's Shark Week is a big thing. It has a lot of marketing behind it, a lot of bucks, right? And so they make these programs. So like the 2024 schedule, we have programs that are, let's see, Belly of the Beast, bigger and bloodier. We have Sydney Harbor Shark Invasion, right?
Ooh, invasion. Yeah. Oof.
There's big shark energy, which is
Ooh.
just makes me like gross. that I don't. Yeah. Great white serial killer, sea of blood,
Oh,
deadliest
wow. That one's
bite.
good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's Monsters of Oz. Like what? Great White Danger Zone, Shark Attack Island. Like it's really annoying. Honestly, like that's just how I feel about it.
Sensationalistic.
Like it's annoying.
Yeah.
And what I love is there are people, influencers, scuba instructors, freediving instructors, expedition guides who are showing the real side of being around sharks and how important they are to the environment, but also to the people in these locations, right? Like you were talking about, tourism is a big moneymaker for people. It provides jobs, and sharks are much more valuable alive than dead. Like
Mm-hmm.
we've proven that time and time again. So seeing these people show the realities of sharks, showing them in the wild, and especially some of the people that I follow or I've seen on social media maybe get a little too handsy for uh my liking, but they know a lot more about swimming with those sharks than I do. Maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
necessary if you're doing like free diving or snorkeling trips with these sharks, but they really show the reality that they're just there and they're curious, but they're not bloodthirsty for us. We don't
Right.
register as their food.
Right. Right. And you hear all those words, right? They're very, very strong words. Attack, invasion, bloody bite, all of these kind of things that immediately you can imagine in your brain, right? An invasion of sharks. What comes to your brain? Just, sharks with, one uber shark leading them down the path of like, an army of them coming to get you because they're hungry and they don't like the humans, and that's kind of unfortunate in the sense of the sensationalistic view. And so I was curious. I went and I really liked the World Wildlife Organization,
Yeah.
and I wanted to see what they had to say about all this. And so I pulled up an article. They have a whole thing about this sensationalistic view of sharks, and they walk through a few myths around sharks. So maybe we could walk through them and
Yeah.
right alongside the World Wildlife Organization, dispel some of these myths. And for you as scuba divers out there, we seem to be, as divers, much more educated on this species than most people are, I would say non-divers would be. And so these are things maybe you already know, but now you can take and help your friends who are watching Shark Week and going, oh my gosh. And then they say, I mean, I gave a little presentation, not a presentation, I don't know what you call it, but I went into my kids' classes and talked about scuba.
Cute.
Right. And, so you bring the gear and you talk about, okay, well, I need to swim. So what do I use? And I need to be warm. So what should I wear? And, all this stuff, and let them breathe off of a regulator and then immediately like disinfect the thing. But it's so funny because then you do a Q&A afterwards, and it's consistent. Whenever I talk to kids about sharks, the first question, and the funniest one I ever got was, have you ever been eaten by a shark? Okay. Well, logically here, buddy, like I'm not going to go into the logic of your question, but no, sharks are actually really amazing creatures to see under the water, and not even kids, have that. So maybe we could walk through these myths together and talk through them. What do you think?
What's the first one? Hit me with it.
All right. Shark myth number 1. All sharks are big and they all have lots of sharp teeth.
We know that's not true.
Yeah.
You can actually see all of the sharks that we saw on one of our last dives together. we only dove it together a couple of times in Southern California, but we did that horn shark dive that you mentioned, and they're little, they're so cute. Like
Yeah.
you just want to, not that you should touch them, but you just want to like boop their little snoots. Like they're so cute.
Yeah, and actually, those sharks, based on that dive, because I went and did some research, they have like molars because what they eat is shellfish. So they use the molars to crush the shells to eat the shellfish. So they don't even have sharp, crazy, teeth that people think of. They have molars, right? Which is wild. So
yeah, all of the sharks, they'll have different teeth based on, like you said, what they eat, right? The scavengers are going to be different than the great whites of the world, right? I've gone diving several times with the six-gill shark in Seattle, and they're scavengers, so they have different setup for their teeth. Some of them are razor sharp, so they're still, you got to be careful, but it's not the same structure.
yeah, and World Wildlife Organization points out they say more than 400 different species. I've also seen the number 500 thrown around. And they say there's everything from, the 8-inch long deep water dogfish. So 8 inches. I mean, you can see that in your hand, right? Or in a piece of paper, 8.5 inches, smaller than an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that you probably have around you right now, all the way to a 40-foot whale shark, which that's on my list as well. I mean, the larger creatures there would be amazing. So, I mean, there's a vast variety of sharks, and they all are playing a different role in the ecosystem. And they are not all big with lots of sharp teeth. In fact, I saw a video recently of these nurse sharks. So I don't know if you've been around nurse sharks, but they're kind of like the golden retriever of sharks, right? They're puppy dogs, right? And they're completely harmless. Even if they bite you, they're harmless, right? And they never bite. And it was hilarious because there's this video, an overhead video, like an aerial drone flying overhead of these snorkelers somewhere, 4 snorkelers. And some nurse sharks come into the area that they're in and are swimming around. And these snorkelers just lose their minds. I mean, they're like hugging each other for safety and like, reassuring each other, we're going to die. I'm going to hold you. And they're like big kind of muscular frat boy looking guys that like are just like babies in each other's arms, like running away from these nurse sharks. And you just laugh because you go like, guys, like you have no idea what's in the water next to you. And they see the sharks and they're trying to run and all this stuff. And they're scared to death of these things.
But it makes sense, right?
It does, totally.
Again, we've been exposed to all this stuff, and if you're not familiar with the ocean, you don't know the difference between a nurse shark and, I mean, hopefully you would know the difference between that and a great white because we've seen them so many times, but you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yep.
But that's true.
So there's a good way, again, for us scuba divers to be advocates. You've probably seen a species of shark that wasn't that torpedo shaped, sharp teeth, sleek looking shark that's portrayed in the movies, that you can say, no, I've had some amazing experiences with some nurse sharks. They're like puppy dogs, or with some horn sharks, and they're really cool. And here's the video. And we can educate non-divers in some ways of the fact that sharks are actually very diverse and very important to our ecosystem. So there's some fodder.
When we used to do those lionfish hunt dives, it was always funny. Not so much in the on the reef right outside of Ishkalak, but we would go to Banco Chinchorro, which is like 33 nautical miles offshore. Beautiful place full of nurse sharks, and we would hunt some lionfish out there. And man, they were like you said, puppy dogs. They would just come after the what is it? The lionfish keeper, whatever you call that.
Yeah, the keeper, zookeeper.
Zookeeper. There we go.
Yeah.
And they would just be hanging out with us the entire dive, not necessarily going after the thing, but they were just interested, right? They smelled the fish and everything. And it was always so fun because people would get freaked out by it. And it's like, it's fine. They're literally not gonna do anything. Like, take some photos. Yeah. They're enjoying this too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. What's next?
All right. Myth number 2. all sharks are man eaters, or sharks are man eaters.
We've already covered that one, so
We have.
we know that that's not true.
Yeah. So I mean, again, you have everything from, like you say, all of the different ways that they're going to eat, but majority of sharks eat fish or invertebrates such as squid or clams, and you even have the whale shark that's straining plankton through its modified gills, right? So there are lots of different ways that they eat. Humans are not food for sharks. We are not considered a food source. Period. Right. Most of the incidents that we hear about are either exploration,
right,
of is this a dolphin or is this a seal, or it's a case of mistaken identity for whatever reason, and that's where that all comes in. So we are not food for sharks, and I think we can just put a period at the end of that.
There we go. What's the next one?
All right, number 3. Sharks are not important.
We've already covered that one too, actually. So
is there one? We're nailing it. We're nailing it here.
Is there
there's
one
only
that
5.
we
I think there's only 5
talked about?
Yep. So let's see. Number 4. Can anything hurt a shark?
Oh, well, we've also talked about that, right? People are the biggest factors here. Otherwise, they're pretty much left alone.
Yeah. And it's important to note here, I think, in this is that sharks grow in, again, relativity to other species pretty slowly.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't produce like a ton of young. They don't pup like a ton. I remember I was in Playa, I think, and there were a bunch of pregnant nurse sharks, or pregnant bull sharks, sorry.
Yeah, that's usually during the winter months when you see them in Playa del Carmen. Those are pregnant females.
Yeah, and I think they pup 1 or 2 at most. I don't know the exact number, but I was surprised at how few there were per each of the females. And so because of that, they're not like prolific, they're not like land bunnies, which, my goodness, our spring came around our property here, and the bunnies they just show up everywhere. And so they're not like that. And so because of that, the ghost nets and like we talked about, unregulated fishing and shark fin soup and all these sorts of things, bycatch, all that. Taking out a shark, the repopulation rate is relatively low, so it has a high impact.
Yeah.
Versus like you talk about with the lionfish, they're the bunnies of the reef, right?
Goodness, they reproduce like crazy. It's insane.
Yeah. So yes, things can hurt sharks, mostly humans.
Yeah. What's next?
Oh man, and we covered this one too. So we should have read this through first and then. But sharks attack people often. So we just talked about the rate that's there. They said in 2018. So here's some more stats. Only 5 shark-related human deaths. 2018. I don't have the 2023 stats in front of me. But again, they reinforce the fact that you're more likely to be struck by lightning than to be attacked by a shark. So we know that's not true. So, hey, look, we covered most of the
bada bing, bada boom.
World Wildlife Org's points here, which is great without us actually going through the list. So congratulations to us, I guess.
So I think the takeaway is, if you like Shark Week, like, that's great, and you do you. I don't want to yuck anybody's yum or whatever, but like, I guess I kind of already did when I said that I didn't like Shark Week. But if that's part of your yearly Discovery watch, then that's fine. But also be an advocate for the truth, right? Like, we can take their programs with a grain of salt, that they're titling things to get views and to draw in people that it's kind of like the news. It's like the negative stuff gets the most traction. Like, that's just whatever it is about human nature. You could probably talk more about that. We're drawn to the drama right? Like that's just
Yeah.
what our conscious, like I don't know what it is about us that does that, but it's it's that balance of, okay, we're going in here to be entertained versus like what is the truth and what needs to happen for these creatures. Because if we keep hurting them at the rate that we are going to see, just like in all these other aspects of environmentalism, like there's so many things collapsing around us and we have to change something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to build on your point there, I think, if you just think physiologically, why are we attracted to things that kind of scare us, right? When it comes to not just sharks, but when we start to talk about roller coasters or horror movies, or just that, the apex or climax of a movie that we really enjoy, an action movie. And it's that fight or flight, innately that kicks into us, right? That shot of chemicals that we get when we go, oh my gosh, we get tense. And there's a payoff to that, right?
Yeah, that
There's a
adrenaline
payoff
hit.
from the adrenaline to the nice hit of serotonin, right? And that comes through and calms us down when there's resolution and all these things, right? We are physiologically built with this fight or flight mechanism that gets triggered by something that's scary, like a roller coaster. And the way that happens in storytelling is that as we see ourselves, or we're seeing a story, we innately put ourselves into the role of that character. That's why, you have all these, Harry Potter, which house are you in? And are you, I don't, what was the big were you into the vampire thing? I never got into it, but there's like a big one vampire versus the other vampire, thing with whatever series that was that people put them in. It's us, reflecting or art reflecting ourselves, right? And us kind of putting ourselves in that story. And so when we're watching this, what is it, the Shark Invasion bloodiest bite ever, show, we're putting ourselves in the role of the unassuming swimmer who's about to be invaded by all these sharks, and that triggers that fight and flight. It triggers that chemical release. And so again, I think you make a really good point, is to be aware of why you're doing that, or why you're attracted to it. If you like it, hey, if you like it, you like it. I'm not a big fan, but I think the flip side of that coin is to also have a tinge of reality. And for me as a parent, it's really important to educate my kids on sharks. And I'm not saying that you should be, the banner child for educating all your friends, host a party to educate them on the reality of sharks during Shark Week. But as these stories come out, as this kind of sensationalism comes out, and I tell you, it's probably one of the top 3 questions I get from non-divers that find out that 100%. I'm a diver.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a shark? And my answer is practiced at this point. It's yes. I've definitely swam with sharks and dove with sharks, and they're incredible creatures. And let me tell you about why. So I think that that's a role that we can play as divers, is in maybe being a softer edge to the sensationalism and the storytelling that's out there, with our own storytelling one-to-one of our own experiences with them. And I'd also encourage you, if you're a diver and maybe this has been something that you've wanted to do, but you've been afraid, or that maybe you've, avoided because of you watch too much Shark Week, whatever it is. I encourage you to do the research, right? On your own. Don't believe Sarah and I. Do the research on your own, and challenge yourself to take one of those dives. And I think you'll find the rewards to be far outweighing the risk, for sure.
Let's go shark diving. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
By the way, I looked it up as we close this one. Worldwide 2023, 69 attacks worldwide, and 36 of those happened in the US. Here's the interesting stat here, is the states with the most: Florida, unsurprisingly.
Of course.
Hawaii's second with 8. New York's number 4. North Carolina's number 3 with 3. California was 2.
What?
Only had 2. I know. South Carolina had 2. And New Jersey had 1. And of course, the great state of Wisconsin leads all of them with 50, land shark bites. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, what is happening right now?
Land shark. Two favorite species of shark: land shark and cave shark.
Oh my God. That's surprising to me. I hadn't looked up the current stat. I figured California would be higher up on that.
Me too. And they say that 42% of the unprovoked attacks or bites were surfers.
Yeah.
So the vast majority of surfers, which makes complete sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, they spend the entire time of their sport at the surface. Like we always say, being at the surface is the most dangerous spot for us as scuba divers, right? It's usually because of boat traffic.
Yeah.
That's the standard thing that we're worried about at the surface. But, the sharks check out things that are on the surface. So that makes sense. Cool. Well, I think that's pretty good. I would love to see people's favorite photos. Like if you have a video or a photo of that shark going over you, you should share it in our Facebook group.
I will.
Okay. There we go. We could get like even just a screenshot of like the moment. That would be really cool. And I would love to see anybody else's like favorite shark moments, photos, or whatever. You can check out the Dive Table group on Facebook. And as always, you can reach out to me and Jay. I'm Sarah with an H at thedivetable.com, and Jay is Jay, Jay, at thedivetable.com. So thank you so much for listening. Anything else from you, Jay?
Yeah, one last point would just be, and get involved. There are a lot of amazing organizations that are focused on shark conservation. And so if you are interested or passionate about this or whatever it might be, and that's a challenge to myself as well. I have not taken on that challenge to get involved in one of those organizations, but there are a lot.
You should. I'm doing I've told you and I've told these people, I'm doing a trip with Fins Attached, and we're doing shark conservation and shark research in Socorro. That's happening April 2025. And like, so cool. They're doing such interesting work. There are many organizations that work directly with sharks. And we're actually going to have, the plan is to have Fins Attached on the podcast in the future. So hopefully that will get scheduled and will be live for all of you to listen to very soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. So get involved if you can. And thank you for joining us on this episode of The Dive Table. We hope to have you back on the next one.
Bye.
The Dive Table is a production of Fish Dive Surf Incorporated and a member of the Fish Dive Surf Podcast Network. You can find out more at www.fishdivesurf.com.